Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott. Now, I love reviewing the big power stations that use batteries to power pretty much everything. And the more that they can power, the better. But the truth of the matter is that those monstrosities often weigh 40, 50 pounds plus. So they're just not going to cut it if you want to go camping. And frankly, in many situations, you don't need that kind of power. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the EcoFlow Trail 300, a 300 watt hour DC power source that can power all of the stuff you'll actually use while camping. So we're going to jump into the tent and see if it actually fits the bill. Now, last year I reviewed the Anker Solix C300, which is a very similar type product, and I did like this a lot. I actually use it all the time. I find it really handy even when not camping for a lot of things, particularly since, if much as possible, I like to actually power my things and charge them through these and then use solar to charge these, so it feels like I'm just doing a little bit to save on energy. But this new EcoFlow model is about 19% lighter and a little bit smaller all around, and so that can be a significant factor if you're really counting every gram or ounce when you're going out camping. So let's talk a little bit about some of the specs and features here. Price tag at the moment, I checked as of today on the website, it is $159 US. And so by the time we get through all this, I think that we'll discover that this is really good value for money. There's a lot of things going on here, a lot of things that you can do with this, and obviously you're getting a significant amount of power. You're getting 288 watt hours of LFP cells of storage, and so if you think in terms of MAH, that's 90,000 MAH, so the equivalent of about 9 of your typical 10,000 MAH like power banks that you're going to get from Amazon or things like that. And so, you know, right there you're starting to get a sense of the value because of that capacity. You know, if you bought 9 of those, you would definitely be over $159 US. There can get up to 300 watts of output. This is all DC, however. There is no AC adapter, no inverter built into it, so you're not going to be able to plug a typical power cord in. This is all going to be based around DC. So DC would include USB-A, USB-C that is represented here, and then also your more old-fashioned DC output, which looks like the old cigarette lighter. So you can both charge and output via these things, at least as far as the USB-C and the DC. The battery is rated for many, many cycles. I think about 4,000 cycles at this point, and that gives you basically 10 years of daily full recharge. And so really this should last you for as long as you need it for. What we don't have here is any kind of pop-up camp light on it, and that's one feature that the Solix has that I do wish that this had, particularly for a camping type unit. You know, having that pop-up light is going to be useful in some situations. So that is one thing that is lacking here. Now, you can output up to the current highest standard of USB-C. So that's up to 140 watts per output on this. And you can actually double up when it comes to the charging side of things. And you can actually use 2 140 watt inputs. And so actually charge at a rate of 280 watts when you're charging via the USB-C input. Now, your challenge there, of course, is you've got to get that 140 watt output from somewhere. And so that means having something that can output power that quickly, which isn't necessarily all that common at this point. You can get AC adapters that can do that, but remember, if you're going to get all the way up to the 280 watts, you're going to have to do 2 of those. So that's going to be some additional cost. I think for most people, they'll probably be happy to charge at a slower rate and not spend a lot of additional money from that. On that note, you can charge up to 110 watts via solar. We have got the XT60 input port here, and so that you can use that for solar, which is pretty much the common standard these days, so I like that. And then likewise, you can also charge through the DC port, cigarette lighter style, up to 110 watts as well. And that can be handy if you're driving to your destination or going out to eat or get supplies, and you can plug it in and charge it up that way if you don't have access to solar, for example. Now, one thing that I don't love about many of these outdoor units, you know, designed around camping or things like that, and that is that they don't have native IP ratings. This does have an IP30 rating, but really that's more about drop. It's going to be tough, has a nice hard exterior to it, and so you can drop it. Not that I'm recommend doing that, but it can take a little bit of abuse and not fall apart on you. So that is great. However, if you're going to want to actually get an IP water or dust ingress rating, you're going to have to instead get an additional option, accessory that comes, you can buy for it, which is a waterproof case, and that will get you that higher IP resistance. It isn't there natively. I do wish that that was part and parcel of the package, but of course the price tag probably would have been higher if it had done that. Now, in terms of the overall size and dimensions here, this obviously has a different type of profile relative to the Solix model, which is pretty much, like a tall cube. This is more of a rectangular shape, kind of looks like a computer tower is the closest thing I can think of, just a micro version of that. It is 167 millimeters by 115 millimeters, and then 166 millimeters in height. And so that compares for the Solix. It's very different dimensions, but its biggest dimension is 200 millimeters in terms of its height, and then 120 by 124 millimeters for the overall shape. So you do all of the math, and this is a smaller unit, but you won't necessarily see that because it just has a completely different kind of profile. Importantly, however, here the weight is a little bit lower. So 5.69 pounds or 2.58 kilograms. It does have that integrated carry strap that you can see there, which is important. You might want to hang it sometimes, but biggest thing is just carrying it around. It's a much more convenient way to do that. And obviously, if you really were having to, say, backpack into a site, you could, it's light enough, you could hang that off of a strap or loop on your backpack. It may not be ergonomically fantastic, but I think it would work carrying it in that kind of situation. The LCD screen here is not big, but it is nice and bright, and it has a good amount of information on it, and it'll let you know how much longer the battery would last, with the current output. It would let you know both input and output, and then it gives you an overall state of charge, a little bit more information on there depending on what ports you have attached to it and are active at the moment. The overall layout of the screen actually kind of reminds me of Blue Eddy, just kind of a smaller version of what I see on Blue Eddy products. But I like it. It's nice, bright, it's easy to read, and I was able to read it even in fairly bright conditions. So all of that I appreciate. So let's talk about the ports. Overall, we have 5 total ports here, and so that includes 2 of the aforementioned USB-C ports. Those, as mentioned, are rated up to 140 watts. And by the way, you do have to be careful about your cables. It's not just the output source, but it's also a cable has to be able to carry that capacity, and I have tested that before. You're going to want to get kind of cables that are rated up to that if you want to achieve that maximum output, because not all cables are created equally with the amount of power that they can transmit. You've got 2 USB-A ports that are rated at 12 watts. Standard is always lower on those. That's part of an older standard, but I'm glad to have the USB-A ports because there's still plenty of things that maybe the native cable that came with it, whatever end it has, at the point it attaches to your device, it probably has a USB-A connection at the other end. So it's very handy to have those. And then, as mentioned, we have got the covered cigarette lighter style DC port, and so I appreciate that. And then also we have our solar input that is there, and that is the XT60 style. And again, on the port side of things, there is no AC here. This is a DC only unit. So, frankly, with these, there are only a limited amount of things to actually test. I have worked basically at charging it and then powering other things from it. And so I have used it to power things like my cameras. I've used it to power things like phones and tablets and my laptop. I've used it to power things like emergency lights. I've used it to power the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 that I'm filming on right now. All of these things, and basically the way that it shapes down, if you're curious how much that kind of battery life is going to last you if you're going out camping. If you're testing or you're charging typical cameras, which most of them have a pretty similar battery capacity, you're looking at about 22 times that you could charge a camera. Phones and tablets, obviously that's going to vary depending upon the capacity of the phone. As far as a phone like mine, it's about 15 or 16 times that it can charge. And so that's obviously going to be useful, particularly if there's a number of people that are camping with you and everybody wants to charge their phone. And of course, they all want to charge their phone. If you're using something like a laptop, it's going to be more like 7 to 8 times bigger battery capacity, obviously there, and so it's going to take a little bit more power. One of the things you often have to do if you are camping is maybe run a pump for an air mattress. You're going to, obviously, there has to be something that can run off of a DC pump, not an AC pump, which a lot of my air mattresses require an AC connection. So it's not useful for me in that anything that I currently have, but there is a shift towards USB-C because it has become so ubiquitous. And so under that circumstance, they say that you can charge about 54 times, or power up enough to inflate around 54 air mattress. So that's a lot, obviously. So that's great there. Depending on your camp fan or your camp light, how big they are and how much power they need, they say up to 44 times. That wouldn't be true of the one that I'm using right now, which is from Ogre that I reviewed earlier this year. That camp fan actually has a really large capacity, and so I could charge it maybe 2 or 3 times, but frankly that's all I would need from it. The battery, and that lasts forever because its battery is so big. Now, I also did test charging, and one of the things that I'm always very curious about is when it comes to the solar charging rate. They claim on the EcoFlow unit that you can charge up to 110 watts versus 100 watts for the Anchor. I was curious to see how that played out because rarely are you achieving kind of that maximum capacity with solar. And so what I found is that I put them side by side using identical solar panels and obviously in the same conditions. And what I found that surprised me actually is that while I wasn't hitting all the way up to 110 watts, what I did find is that consistently the EcoFlow was sucking in electrons at about 5 to 10 watts higher than what the Solex unit did. And so that is obviously great because it just means that you're going to charge it faster. I mean, when you're talking about, say, drawing about 80 watts off of a solar panel, if you're consistently charging 5 to 10 watts faster, that just means you're going to be able to charge your device up that much quicker. And as someone that's done a lot of solar charging, solar is fickle, particularly here in Canada, and so the faster I can get something charged and not worry about it before the sun conditions change, fantastic. And so I certainly appreciated that. And again, I am able to replicate charging up to 280 watts, but basically what I have to do is hook this up to another power station. That's about the only thing that I have that can give me the output of 140 watts times 2 to charge that up. And so again, it's a limited value application, but you can charge quick enough, even if you're just doing it at a more typical 140 watts from one adapter, you can charge that within a few hours, which is certainly very useful. So how about some things that I like? I like the fact that it is light and portable. It's something like this, the smaller the better. And I'm actually eager for the technology to continue to evolve to where we've got something that's half this size with the same kind of output. But it is great that we are moving in the right direction, trending in the right direction, and that this is in fact smaller and lighter. I appreciate that our USB-C ports are delivering the highest current standard available. And, until that technology progresses further, being able to get all the way up to 140 watts can be useful if you have the right cable and you have a device that's able to suck electrons at that kind of rate. So that is great. I like the bright screen here. I like the nice clean UI. It's easy to see. I like that the power button is responsive and works well. Sometimes with these things, it's a little bit of a mystery whether or not the power button is going to work, but this seems to be nice and responsive. Doesn't feel like I have to hold it down forever before something starts to happen. And the fact that it is fast charging, I appreciate that as well. How about some things that I don't like so much? Well, I'm going to continue to knock all of these that don't have an IP rating. I think that if you're advertising, marketing something as being a camping device where you experience weather, I think that they should come with some kind of IP rating on them. Maybe not if they're sitting in a puddle, but at least if it starts to rain that you don't have to worry about it. One critique I do have is that they're taking advantage of the fact that USB-C has become so ubiquitous. And so there's no AC adapter for charging the unit itself. But beyond that, there's not even one USB-C cable included in the box. And that feels particularly kind of cheap to me because particularly when you have the capacity to do that 140 watt output or input in terms of the charging, at least having one cable, because a lot of people, they may not have that one cable that's rated at 140 watts. So including at least one of those in the box, which by the way, Anchor did with the Solex C300, I think that they should have done. And the other thing that we're missing is any kind of camp light. And things are getting wild in here, as you can see at the moment. That's one of the other joys of camping. I would like to have seen an integrated camp light of some kind, because again, I just think that for a camping oriented device, that could be really, really useful. So my conclusion is this. This is another well-executed unit that I think is going to be very handy for a lot of people. And if you're someone that's already a fan of the EcoFlow brand, which a lot of you are because they claim to be the #1 unit moving portable power company in the world, then obviously this is going to be appealing to you. I appreciate the fact that it is smaller and lighter than alternatives. I appreciate the fact that you've got lots of capacity, you've got good ports that have lots of potential power output from it, and I think that the price, as mentioned in the intro, I think the price is really reasonable for all that you're getting here. I would just like it a little bit better if they threw in a cable and maybe a few seals here to make it IP rated. I hope that this has helped you out today to decide whether or not this can become your new camping companion. As always, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.